So in this PowerPoint, we're going to continue on with basic classes and objects. We're going to look at static members. So to recap, a custom data type is defined by a class. An instance of a class is called an object. Okay, and multiple unique objects can be instantiated from one class. Okay, so this process of bundling related data and methods into a type, okay, it's called encapsulation, and it makes the code easier to organize and reuse. So what if we needed to do something related to the type itself and not the instances of that type? So for example, where do we store the count of all the forest objects, and where do we store an explanation of forests in general? So these shouldn't be associated with just one instance of it, right? It will apply to all the instances. This information is related to the forest class, not just one forest instance. So when these facts and behaviors should be associated with the class itself, we call these types of members static. Okay, so the learning objectives for this class, today's lesson, is to find out the meaning of static, to learn how to apply it to different types of class members, and look at its typical use cases. Okay, so previously you learned how to create a field and a property, right? Okay, so here we have a field, and here we have a property. Okay, the field is normally private, right? And it's all lowercase. The property is usually public and has a uppercase for the first letter. Okay, and it has the get and the set. So this definition of what a forest is would apply to all the forest objects, right? Not just one. So there should only be one value for the whole class. So this is a good use case for a static field or static property. So to make a static field and property, add static after the access modifier, which is either public or private, right? So private static string definition and public static string definition here. Okay, so that's how you would set it. That's how you would make it a static field here, and that's how you make it a static property here. So static means basically associated with the class. Static means it's associated with the class, not with the instance. Any static member is accessed from the class, not an instance. So if you try to access a static member from an instance, like f.definition, you're going to get an error. Okay, so f is an instance of it, right? And you're trying to get the definitions for that instance, so that is going to provide an error or show an error. So previously, you've learned how to create an instance method, right? Like this. Here we go. Public. So there's the method define, right? So console write line definition. Okay, so this behavior prints the general definition, right? And it's not specific to any one instance. It applies to the class itself. So it should be made static. Okay, so to make a static method, just add static after the access modifier, which is either public or private. So here we have the method, right? It's a public method, and you just add static to it. Okay, so notice that we add static to both the field definition. Okay, this is the field. We add static to it, and also to the method, right? Method here. So add static to the field definition and to the method, because a static method can only access other static members. So a static method cannot access instance members. Okay? So here, this is going to throw an error here. Okay, if you write line or print definition here, this is going to throw an error because definition, this field, is not static. Okay, so you have to call it static here. All right, so let's look at static constructors. An instance constructors run before an instance is used. So a static constructor is run once before a class is used. So this static constructor is run when? Before an object is made from that type. Okay? So if forest f new forest was the first line in main, a static constructor for forest would have already been run. So before a static member is accessed, okay. So forest.define was the first line. So if forest.define was the first line in main, a static constructor for forest would be run. So we use static constructors to set the values for to static fields and properties. A static constructor does not accept an access modifier, so no need for private or public. Okay, so far I've covered a few static members like field, property, method, constructor. What if we made the whole class static? It would look like this: static, class, and then forest, right? With all that stuff in the curly brackets. So a static class cannot be instantiated. You can't have an instance of a static class. So you only want to do this if you're making a utility or a library, like if you're making a math class or a console. Okay, if you're not going to make an instance of it, then make it a static class. Otherwise, don't. Okay, so these two common classes are static because they're really just tools, math and console. They don't need specific instances, okay? And they don't store new information, okay? So remember, math min is just a tool to be used. We're never going to have an instance of math min, right? Or console write line is also a tool to be used. It prints stuff, it does stuff. We're never going to have an instance of it, right? So these are two static classes calling two static methods. So let's look at common static errors. When you label a static constructor as public or private, which is not allowed, okay? That's one of the errors. When you try to reference a non-static member from a class, okay, instead of from an instance. Or when you try to reference a static member from an instance instead of from the class. So you've seen main many times, right? Since the beginning, but now we're going to learn about it. Now we're ready to learn about it. So the main method is really the entry point for any program, okay? So that's why we have main method here. This is the entry point, all right? This is what I always tell you to paste the code into your program.cs and then you get started here, right? So this is the entry point. So main is a method for the program class, okay? Main is like any other method you have encountered. It has a special use for C#. Okay, so here, let's break it down. So class, program, you have public, right? The access modifier, because this method can be called outside of the program class. And it's static. Okay, the method is called from the class name. And void, meaning this method returns nothing. And then this is the name of the class, and then here you have them. This method has one parameter named args, which is an array of strings. Okay, right? A string array. So we understand what all this is, right? All broken down. And that brings us to the end of this PowerPoint.